Council, you'll be finding us making significant investments into the future, but we need to be confident of our ground first, having been in government for barely 5 months.
All right, our next question is from within the audience. It comes from Tammy Liu.
Hi, Mr. Rudd. I'd just like to know, why did you decide to learn Mandarin at university? And do you think China will play a big role on the world stage in the future?
Well, I grew up on a dairy farm in Queensland. Sounded like a good thing to do at the time. I was just always interested in China, and interested because I, as a kid growing up, thought it would have a big impact on us in the future. And it's kind of turned out that way. If you look at everything the government does, it's been increasingly, and the community does, it's increasingly being impacted by China just because of its size. Climate change. You can't have a debate about greenhouse gas emissions without China being central to it. If you look at the human rights debate that we've been talking about already, there's a huge human rights challenge when it comes to Tibet. You know, let's be blunt about it. The economy, the inflation factor, the terms of trade, the import of Australian resources. China is by far and above our largest, our fastest growing export market. All these factors impinge, and therefore we are at the beginning of an Asia-Pacific century, where the rise of China, the rise of India, and the continuing role of Japan and our nearest neighbour Indonesia are going to so fundamentally shape this country's future that the more people who are across this in all of its dimensions, security policy, strategic policy, economic policy, social policy, language, culture, the rest. Frankly, if I've got a hope, it's that we become not just the most Asia-literate country in the collective West, but also the most China-literate country, because it's going to be such a huge impacting factor for Australia's future.
All right, our next question is from Mary. Sorry about that. Our next question is from Mary Perkins.
Prime Minister, I've noted your nickname, Kevin 24/7.
There are others much less polite.
How will you prevent bad decisions by you or your ministers because you're all dead dog tired?
That's a really good question. Yeah. Well, we're all human, and we all, we all get down on the battery sometimes. Today's an interesting day. I started in Melbourne, went to Adelaide, and ended up here.
My point.
And Tony Jones expects me to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. So I think the first 5 or 6 months of government is really intense. It means making sure that you've got the fundamentals right through to the conclusion of the budget. I can't anticipate actually that it's going to lead to any slackening in the pace of what we do. And I think what has changed in Australia is two things happening here. One is so many of these big challenges that we've been talking about tonight, whether it's climate change, whether it's energy security, dealing effectively with retirement incomes policy, dealing also with the challenge of the emergence of China. A lot of this has not been effectively addressed by the previous government for a long time. And therefore, what we are finding is the catch-up football involved in what we're doing is huge. And that's before you come to the new challenges which are rolling down the railway tracks towards us as well. So it's going to be tough, but don't worry, I have my Wheaties every morning.
All right. I know there's a lot of people with their hands up, but we have chosen a question. It's from Penny Holly.
Mr Rudd, Ben Chifley saw a light on the hill in 1949. Gough Whitlam talked of a better Australia for our children in 1972. The Labor Party is traditionally a party of direct intervention for the betterment of a society. In years to come, what single identifiable improvement would you like the Rudd Labor government to be given credit for, and how do you intend to achieve it?
I think my vision for the country's future, if you were to ask me it in a sentence, and that's hard, is how do we make Australia into the best educated, best skilled, best trained people, society, economy in the world? And that means, you've heard me talk about an education revolution. It means not fiddling around with this anymore, but making it central to everything we do. If we're a knowledge economy and a knowledge society, frankly, a lot of the challenges we face in the future are able to be dealt with. If we're not, and we're falling further down the pecking order of states, I get really worried about that. So for me, an education revolution, but with that end point, not to be number 15th or 16th in the table of nations and states in terms of producing the best and brightest, and to have the best trained and best skilled tradespeople, but in fact to be right up there at the top league. There's one other part to it as well. Just make sure no one's left behind, and you bring everyone with you.
Okay. Now, I know I saw in the audience there a number of struggling students on their meagre allowances who desperately wanted to get a question in on when that might change so they won't have to survive on dog food.
A leading question, it's that.
But that is, in fact, all we have time for. I'm sorry, we'll have to come back to that question in the future. But thanks very much for joining our very first edition of Q&A. We'll be back next week on ABC1 when our panel, including Tanya Plibersek and Tony Abbott and Bob Brown, will face the Q&A audience. You can sign up to be part of the studio audience in Sydney by registering on our website, abc.net.au/Q&A. That's QandA. And you can watch at home or on your computer, and you can SMS your questions during Q&A. Thank you very much to the Prime Minister, Kevin Rudd. And thanks indeed to our audience for getting out and getting involved. Each week, we'll end the program with a video mash that you can see again on our website. And we're starting this week with the work of Hugh Atkins, celebrating 6 months of the thoughts of Chairman Rudd. Good night.
我军左翼穿插部队也冲破越军一道又一道封锁线，按时插到敌人后方。只有一条公路通向陆地，红灯守敌已成瓮中之鳖，退路被切断。不可一世的英雄团插翅难逃。岱乃地区的10号公路是越军支援丹塘的唯一通道，进可解丹塘之围，退可守老巢门。公路边有一座500米的山头。2月21日，316A 师的先头部队就站稳了这个山头，被迫在广西、云南2个方向同时发起对越，自卫还击作战。